Studies on business communication are well-known research subjects for scholars around the world. Narrowing the area of research and focusing on one issue in modern society may give a more sophisticated understanding of the differences between communication styles based on multiple measures. One's personality, ethnicity, gender, temperament, culture, religion, education, political views, and much more should be considered. In this study, I focused on the differences in message clarity between genders and constructed an analysis based on in-depth interviews. This revealed what causes these issues and how to prevent miscommunication in the workforce. Charlotte is the second largest financial sector in the nation, with companies and corporations such as Bank of America, Citibank, Ally Financial, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo all host operations here. The jobs offered by these big banks helped Charlotte's population swell over the years. These factors result in hundreds of thousands of employees in banking and financial service industries. I interviewed 12 professionals who work for small organizations and large corporations. Each interviewee was selected to build a sample size reflective of the diversity typically seen in these companies. I was most interested in learning more about challenges both genders face daily.
Diversity among executive positions is definitely skewed towards men. You tend to see a lot more men in higher roles, and it sort of trickles down actually into my group. And part of that is being a part of more of a technology-based group. There's definitely a skew towards men.
We're probably 60-65% male, 35-40% female.
Gender ratio in our team is about 50-50.
In our region, our gender ratio is pretty low. We, managing directors kind of at the higher level in our organization, and we only have one woman in that role in the Carolinas.
It's pretty diverse in terms of ethnic demographics, in terms of race. It's still mostly men in my department and in the trading area, who we support.
The first finding turned out to be an obvious one. In 2017, full-time male employees in North Carolina made 1.3 times more than female employees. Gender inequality, which has improved over the years, still has a long run to catch up. Over 80% of organizations in the business industry have a male-dominant ratio in leadership positions. Such a gap is also reflected in salaries and, of course, gender communication perspectives.
I think a lot of it stems from more men being a part of executive roles, because partially just the way that generations have changed. They've been in these roles for some years, and as most people know, men have typically had more opportunities when it comes to education, so that has led to more opportunities in the workplace. I do think the pattern of more men in higher roles is changing. I think we still have a long way to go, but I do see more opportunities for women and a lot of great opportunities in groups like Women in Leadership that are available at Bank of America that allow women like myself to become involved in not only the enterprise but also the community. I think it sort of opens the door for roles of higher positions for women.
As certain generations grow and move out of the workforce and others come in, I think I think we'll see a lot of changes in the future, especially as we see baby boomers retire, because a lot of that older mindsets, I believe, will retire with them.
40% of business employees do not feel difference in communication styles due to an individual's gender. Another 30% feel somewhat different in communication style between genders. And a total of 30% of participants notice a substantial difference in communication and message clarity caused by gender differences. The unique finding of this research is the more balanced an organization is from a gender perspective, the less difference in gender communication is noticed by business professionals. Lack of clarity in messages may create lots of problems in an organization. Successful communicators use their communication skills to reduce any potential misinterpretation in dialogue. In this research, males and females shared when clarity issues are occurring and what their actions were when they misunderstood a message.
I think it's one of the things that, one of the areas within a business that gets overlooked in terms of how we can work better as a team. And I see it day to day in my group. We tend to focus just on, okay, well, we have a transaction that happens here, who needs to do what? Well, the other part of that picture is who's talking to who to move that process along the way. And that's where I think I see a lot of issues today within my team, is that we haven't developed and formalized a way for us to interact with each other.
Sometimes bankers and others tend to be more sales oriented and they just want to get the job done and move on. And when I have to tell them, no, there's a process, there's a procedure, it's not always well received. And so they get frustrated with me. And so it's kind of hard for me to take that sometimes, because I can be a little more sensitive, but I know it's more a frustration at the process and the procedure, and I try to remind myself of that.
Always. I mean, every day there's communications issues. Some people explain things differently than others. There's also sometimes a communications gap in terms of cultural differences if we're working with people overseas. But that's not to say that we can't have communications differences right here in the United States. Some people use a lot of jargon when they communicate via email or even on the phone when they're explaining something. So there's always room for that. Almost every day, I'd say we experience some form of communications breakdown.
I have had an issue with misperception in terms of email as a form of communication, primarily through the fact that it's one and done, in that you type down a single sentence and it's up to them to interpret it. If they have a question about that sentence, they don't have that immediacy of being face-to-face and being able to quickly clarify what exactly you mean. So if there is a misperception, it remains outstanding until you can really hear back from them.
People rely so heavily on emails these days, and people can interpret an email however they're feeling that day. There are issues, but a lot of times I feel if it does seem like it would come across curt, I try to get up, walk over to the person, talk to them, or if they're not in my office, pick up the phone and talk. I am a strong proponent for face-to-face communication, or at least verbal communication. You know, for me as well, I try not to read in between the lines of an email, because 90% of the time, however it's coming across isn't how it's intended.
You know, sometimes there's challenges because we all work from home, so everyone is remote and we're communicating via Slack or Google Hangout or email. Yeah, weekly there's maybe a small task or something that might fall through the cracks that either I have to remind someone of or they have to remind me of, but no major large communication breakdowns. We're pretty efficient. I think it helps that we have a small team and a young team.
Creative communicators, or individuals using adaptive communication styles, agreed that the difference in age, culture, or personality are much more extensive factors in communication issues.
I think your experiences, just how you were raised culturally, your background, your disposition to certain topics, level of sensitivity to certain things. I don't think gender sits on top of the main differentiator of how male and females communicate. I think there are other trigger things that shape how I would treat you or talk to you or communicate with you.
I see a lot of different types of communication between age groups. You know, a different generation communicates differently. You know, there may be variables within the company, the industry that they're in, that is different communication styles, but just specifically between male and female, you know, whether it's picking up the phone or email or anything like that, I really don't see a huge difference.
Detailing in business communication is crucial. However, the differences in communication styles between coworkers make it impossible to avoid miscommunication entirely. It is easier than ever to misinterpret the meaning of the message in email and virtual communication. Asking for clarification or more details is the key to find a missing connection in a discourse.
I think that being a creative person does help with clarity in communications. And I think that stems from the ability to restate what has been said to you in a different but similar manner to let them know that you understand what they're saying. And so it validates both of you, and it checks that off the list. They know that you understand what they've told you, and vice versa.
I fixed the issue by communicating with that individual in figuring out exactly what they needed the next time. Instead of corresponding with email, went to actually speak to them in person just to get more clear direction from them as far as what they were needing from me.
I ask for clarification all the time, even if I think I'm pretty sure of what the message is, just to make sure, because I have been in the situations where myself and other colleagues of mine have assumed we understood the message and we got it completely wrong. So just on the safe side, it doesn't take long to re-verify what's being said. So if I get an email, for example, it says, we are changing vendors from this person to this person. So sometimes my feedback may be something along the lines of, okay, so as of this date, we will no longer be using this vendor. Yes, got it.
One thing that might be clear to me might seem cloudy to you or somebody else. And again, that comes from sort of your past knowledge and past experiences, but that's why communication is so important.
I'd say I'm guilty of not asking for task clarification as often as I really should. I grow frustrated, certainly, when I get something that's a little vague in terms of a task I have to complete, but for whatever reason, thinking back on it, I'll sit there frustrated trying to hammer something out as opposed to asking for a little more clarification.
As for now, we know that in an organization where the gender proportion is alike or closer to equal, communication issues are less likely to be contributed to gender-specific communication styles. In a gender-balanced company, creative employees are more likely to be willing to adapt their communication styles without noticing a gender. Adapting your communication approach to different situations challenges effective workers, nevertheless, advances an extensive practice of social intelligence.
Being adaptive helps me in my communication style. It helps me portray what I'm needing in a format that allows that individual to receive it.
When I differentiate, my communication is more of my level of formality with them. If they're a close peer that I don't feel I need to be as formal with, I may not be. But if it's someone I don't work with on a regular basis, I might be a little more formal.
I absolutely feel I'm being adaptive to other communication styles. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think we should appropriate anybody else's style, but I think we need to understand that if someone gets a message in a different way, typically, whether it be culturally, gender, regionally different, I think we need to keep that in mind and to be aware of that difference before we move forward. And not to say you have to change your whole style of communicating, but you need to be mindful of where there may be a gap.
I think that when you work in an organization or enterprise the size of Bank of America like I do, you eventually learn to sort of communicate a certain way. Every line of business has their own approach to their daily work, certain requirements. But I do think that in general, you sort of learn what way you need to communicate, whether it's to your clients or coworkers internally within your own team.
My job is to the person who is in front of me to understand them, to understand maybe what some of the characteristics are that are their hot buttons, how they like to communicate. And I will certainly tailor, and again, this could be male or female, but I will certainly tailor both my message and the way I get it across, based on the personality that I have in front of me.
Millions of business professionals are working daily on improving communication gaps in their organizations and personal lives. This study revealed how the differences in the company's gender ratio of their employees impacts an individual's communication styles and their message perception when communicating with coworkers. It also provides a better understanding of how creative organizations and their employees clarify their ideas and messages to maintain the productivity and eliminate misinterpretation. Coworkers with similar interests, goals, and age can agree that gender is less important aspect than individuals' traits and character. It is important to maintain healthy gender ratio to gain more perspectives and comprehensive understanding of the collaborative ideas in the organization. When it comes to communication styles, there is no single best personality, but rather diversity of characters, social, ethnic groups, and genders preserved by individuals' experiences. Creative balance theory is a new natural state of being in a healthy society. In this theory, creative workers must use an adaptive style of communication, work in a gender-balanced environment, and be a clear communicator. No matter what the reason for differences in communication, it is possible to work through these differences. And it's easier to navigate a shift in business communication when you have a diverse group where individuals can share their perspectives and outline a universal style of communication with versatile teamwork. This theory also suggests we should rethink the roles that males and females have traditionally played in society or workforce and focus on achieving a common goal. Learning to meet each other's needs and to see them as legitimate is a skill that takes practice to develop. And without a doubt, nurturing a creative style of communication leads to a better work environment and consequently, innovations and high productivity.